Dr. Rachel Monroe sat alone in the dimly lit control room of the observatory high up in the mountains of Colorado. The air was crisp, and the hum of machines filled the silence around her. She had been working late into the night, as she often did, scanning the skies for anything unusual. Her eyes were glued to the screen in front of her, where lines of data scrolled endlessly. For weeks now, there had been nothing but static, just random noise from space. But tonight felt different. Something deep inside told her that tonight would be special. Liam Carter walked into the room carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Rachel and took a sip from his own before leaning against the desk. "Still at it?" he asked with a tired smile. Liam wasn't as passionate about astronomy as Rachel was, but he respected her dedication. He worked on the engineering side of things, making sure all the equipment ran smoothly. To him, this job was more about fixing problems than chasing mysteries. Rachel nodded without taking her eyes off the screen. "There's something out there," she said softly. Her voice carried a mix of excitement and uncertainty. Liam raised an eyebrow, but didn't say anything. He had heard her talk like this before, always convinced she was on the verge of discovering something groundbreaking. Most of the time, it turned out to be nothing more than interference from satellites or natural cosmic phenomena. Still, he couldn't help feeling curious when she got like this. The signal came suddenly, interrupting their quiet conversation. At first it sounded like white noise, faint and distant. But then patterns emerged, repeating sequences that didn't match anything they'd seen before. Rachel froze, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she adjusted the settings to isolate the source. The sound grew clearer, almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat echoing through the void of space. It wasn't music or speech, not in any human sense, but it was unmistakably deliberate. "What is that?" Liam asked, leaning closer to the monitor. His skepticism melted away as he listened intently. Even he could tell this wasn't just random interference. There was intelligence behind it, some kind of purposeful design. "I don't know yet," Rachel replied, her voice trembling slightly. She quickly began recording the signal while running analyses to pinpoint its origin. Hours passed as the two of them worked together, barely speaking except to exchange quick updates. Finally, after what felt like forever, Rachel looked up with wide eyes. "It's coming from Proxima Centauri," she said. Liam blinked in disbelief. Proxima Centauri was the closest star system to Earth, located over 4 light-years away. If the signal really came from there, it meant someone, or something, was trying to communicate across unimaginable distances. "Are you sure?" he asked cautiously. Rachel nodded. "The coordinates are clear. It's not coming from our solar system or any known satellite. This is extraterrestrial." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of what they had discovered settled over them like a heavy blanket. They weren't just astronomers anymore. They were witnesses to humanity's first contact with an alien civilization. The thought was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. As dawn broke outside, Rachel decided to play back the entire signal to see if they could decipher any meaning. When the playback reached a certain point, both of them froze. Hidden within the rhythmic pulses was a message, encoded in a way that allowed translation software to interpret it. The words appeared on the screen in plain text. "Do not fight the humans. They will never let you escape." Liam stared at the screen, his face pale. "What does that even mean?" he muttered under his breath. Rachel shook her head, equally baffled. The message seemed like a warning, but who was it meant for? And why would aliens send such a thing to Earth? Before they could think too much about it, Rachel received a call from NASA headquarters. Someone higher up had noticed the anomaly in their data stream and wanted answers. Within hours, representatives from various government agencies arrived at the observatory, demanding full access to their findings. Rachel and Liam found themselves thrust into the middle of a whirlwind of activity. The officials were cautious at first, unsure whether the signal was genuine or some elaborate prank. But as they reviewed the evidence, their skepticism gave way to concern. Whatever this message was, it couldn't be ignored. A meeting was called to discuss next steps, and by the end of the day, Rachel and Liam were assigned to lead a team tasked with investigating further. Their mission, codenamed Project Horizon, would involve sending a spacecraft to Proxima Centauri to uncover the truth behind the mysterious signal. Rachel felt a mix of pride and anxiety about being chosen for such an important role. She knew the journey wouldn't be easy. It would take years just to reach the star system. But she also knew they couldn't turn back now. Humanity had taken its first step toward the stars, and there was no going home. Over the following months, preparations for the mission consumed every waking moment. Rachel and Liam worked tirelessly alongside engineers, scientists, and astronauts to ensure everything was ready for launch. The spacecraft, named Endeavour, was equipped with cutting-edge technology designed to withstand the harsh conditions of interstellar travel. Supplies were carefully packed, experiments planned, and contingencies prepared for every possible scenario. Despite the excitement surrounding the mission, doubts lingered in Rachel's mind. The warning from the signal haunted her, replaying itself over and over in her thoughts. Who were these aliens, and why were they so afraid of humans? Was it possible that Earth had already encountered them in the past, long before recorded history? Or was this message meant for someone else entirely, intercepted by chance? On the day of the launch, Rachel stood beside Liam at the observation deck, watching as the countdown ticked closer to 0. The enormity of what they were about to do hit her all at once. They weren't just exploring space, they were stepping into the unknown, venturing beyond the boundaries of human understanding. As the engines roared to life and the Endeavour lifted off into the sky, Rachel whispered a silent prayer. Whatever waited for them out there, she hoped they were ready. The journey ahead would test them in ways they couldn't imagine, forcing them to confront not only the mysteries of the universe, but also the darker aspects of their own nature. Little did they know, the warning they had received was just the beginning of a story far bigger than themselves, a story that would challenge everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the cosmos. Months passed as the Endeavour traveled through the vast emptiness of space. The crew spent their days monitoring systems, running simulations, and preparing for what lay ahead. Rachel Monroe tried to keep herself busy, but her mind kept drifting, back to the warning they had received. "Do not fight the humans. They will never let you escape." The words echoed in her thoughts like a riddle she couldn't solve. Who were these aliens, and why did they fear humanity so much? She shared her concerns with Liam Carter during one of their late-night conversations in the ship's common area. Liam listened quietly, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe it's just propaganda," he suggested. "Some alien trying to scare others away from Earth." Rachel shook her head. "It doesn't feel like that. There's something deeper here, something we're missing." Despite their differences in perspective, both agreed that the truth awaited them on Erebus, the planet orbiting Proxima Centauri, where the signal had originated. When the Endeavour finally entered the Proxima Centauri system, the crew gathered in the command center to get their first look at Erebus. Through the ship's cameras, the planet appeared dark and foreboding, shrouded in thick clouds that blocked most of its surface from view. The faint glow of twilight illuminated jagged mountains and deep valleys, giving the world an eerie, otherworldly beauty. As they approached, sensors detected unusual energy readings emanating from the surface, hinting at artificial structures buried beneath the terrain. The landing process was tense, but smooth. Once the Endeavour touched down, the crew suited up and stepped onto the alien soil for the first time. The air was thin and unbreathable, forcing them to rely on their oxygen tanks. The ground beneath their boots was hard and rocky, covered in strange, crystalline formations that sparkled faintly in the dim light. Rachel felt a mix of awe and unease as she gazed around. This place was unlike anything she had ever seen, yet it carried an unsettling familiarity, as if it were waiting for them. Their first goal was to locate the source of the energy readings. Following the ship's scans, they trekked across the barren landscape until they reached what looked like ruins. Towering spires of black stone jutted out of the ground, partially buried under layers of dust and debris. Carvings adorned the surfaces, depicting scenes of war and conquest. The images showed insect-like creatures wielding weapons and dominating other species. Rachel traced her gloved hand over one of the carvings, feeling a chill run down her spine. These weren't just ruins. They were remnants of a once powerful civilization. As they explored further, the crew discovered a hidden entrance leading underground. Inside, the walls glowed faintly with bioluminescent patterns, casting an ethereal light over the corridors. The air grew colder the deeper they went, and the silence became almost oppressive. Eventually, they came upon a chamber filled with holographic projectors. When activated, the devices displayed recordings left behind by the planet's former inhabitants, a species known as the Vaylans. The holograms revealed the Vaylans' history. They were conquerors who traveled across galaxies, enslaving weaker species and claiming resources for themselves. Their empire spanned countless worlds, and they saw themselves as untouchable masters of the universe. But everything changed when they encountered humans. According to the logs, the Vaylans had sent a scouting fleet to Earth centuries ago, intending to add humanity to their list of conquests. What happened next shocked the crew. The recordings showed how humans resisted fiercely, using clever tactics and improvised weapons to repel the invaders. Despite being technologically inferior, humanity fought back with unmatched determination. The Vaylans underestimated their opponents, assuming victory would come easily, but they soon found themselves overwhelmed. Humans adapted quickly, learning the aliens' weaknesses and exploiting them ruthlessly. In the end, the Vaylans were forced to retreat, abandoning their plans to conquer Earth. Rachel watched the holograms with growing unease. The message was clear. Humanity's resilience and ingenuity made them uniquely dangerous. Even against superior foes, humans refused to give up. The final entry ended with the chilling words, "Never underestimate the humans. Once provoked, they will hunt you until extinction." The warning wasn't meant for Earth. It was meant for anyone else who might cross paths with humanity. As the crew absorbed this revelation, Adam Hayes, one of the engineers, noticed something odd about the chamber. A faint vibration echoed through the walls, growing stronger with each passing moment. He called out to the others, pointing at a section of the floor that seemed to shift slightly. Before anyone could react, the ground cracked open, revealing a network of tunnels teeming with movement. Shadows scurried in the darkness, accompanied by low, guttural sounds. "Get back to the ship!" Liam shouted, grabbing Rachel's arm and pulling her toward the exit. The crew sprinted through the corridors, their footsteps echoing loudly in the confined space. Behind them, the shadows emerged into the light, revealing the Vaylans. They were insectoid creatures, standing tall, on spindly legs with razor-sharp claws and glowing eyes. Their exoskeletons shimmered in shades of green and black, making them look like living nightmares. The Vaylans moved with terrifying speed, closing the distance between them and the crew in seconds. Grace Bennett, one of the biologists, stumbled and fell, dropping her equipment. Liam turned back to help her, firing his plasma rifle to hold off the advancing swarm. The shots hit their mark, sending bursts of green fluid spraying into the air, but more Vaylans poured out of the tunnels, seemingly endless in number. Rachel led the way to the surface, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew they couldn't outrun the aliens forever. As they burst into the open air, the crew regrouped near the Endeavor. Adam suggested setting up a perimeter defense while they figured out their next move. Using portable barriers and automated turrets, they created a makeshift fortress around the ship. The Vaylans surrounded them, circling like predators sizing up their prey. Rachel's mind raced as she tried to think of a solution. The warning from the holograms replayed in her head. Humanity's strength lay not in brute force, but in strategy and adaptability. She remembered how the humans in the recordings had exploited the Vaylans' weaknesses, turning the tide of battle in their favor. Could they do the same? Looking around, Rachel noticed patterns in the Vaylans' movements. They attacked in waves, retreating briefly before surging forward again. It reminded her of pack-hunting behavior, where predators relied on overwhelming numbers to wear down their prey. If they could disrupt those patterns, they might stand a chance. She shared her idea with Liam, who nodded reluctantly. "It's risky, but we don't have many options," he admitted. Together, they devised a plan to lure the Vaylans into the ruins and collapse parts of the structure to trap them. Explosives rigged from the ship's fuel reserves would create cave-ins, sealing off the tunnels and cutting off reinforcements. While the crew worked to set up the explosives, Rachel stayed behind to coordinate their defense. She directed the others to focus fire on specific groups of Vaylans, forcing them to bunch together and making them easier targets. The aliens responded with fury, launching wave after wave of attacks. Plasma bolts lit up the battlefield, leaving craters in the ground and scorch marks on the barriers. Grace took a hit to her leg, crying out in pain as she fell. Liam rushed to her side, dragging her to safety behind cover. Adam stayed close to Rachel, keeping an eye on her as she barked orders to the team. Despite the chaos, the crew held their ground, buying precious time to complete their sabotage. Finally, the explosives were in place. Rachel gave the signal, and the charges detonated in a series of deafening blasts. The ground shook violently, sending chunks of rock tumbling down into the tunnels below. Dust filled the air, obscuring everything in sight. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the distant skittering of survivors retreating into the depths. The crew wasted no time boarding the Endeavour, their bodies battered and exhausted. As the engines roared to life and the ship lifted off, Rachel glanced out the window at the desolate landscape below. The ruins of Erebus disappeared into the distance, swallowed by the planet's eternal twilight. Though they had survived, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger wasn't the Vaylans, it was humanity itself. Back aboard the Endeavour, the crew tended to their wounds and began debriefing. They had uncovered the truth behind the warning, but the implications weighed heavily on all of them. The Vaylans feared humans not because of their technology or power, but because of their relentless spirit. That same spirit had driven humanity to explore the stars, yet it also carried the potential for destruction. Rachel sat alone in her quarters later that night, staring at the stars outside her window. The mission had answered some questions, but raised even more. What did it mean to be human in a universe full of unknown threats? And how far would humanity go to protect itself or conquer others? As sleep eluded her, she realized that the journey was far from over. Somewhere out there, the last remnants of the Vaylans stirred in their buried chambers, whispering the same ominous phrase, "Do not fight the humans. They will never let you escape." The Endeavour drifted silently through the cold emptiness of space as the crew recovered from their harrowing encounter on Erebus. The wounds they carried were not just physical but emotional as well. Rachel Monroe spent hours staring out the window at the endless sea of stars, replaying the events in her mind. The Vaylans' warning haunted her, not because of what it said about the aliens, but because of what it revealed about humanity. She couldn't stop thinking about how humans had driven the invaders back centuries ago, using nothing but sheer willpower and ingenuity. It made her proud, yet uneasy. What did it mean to be feared across the galaxy? Was humanity destined to conquer or to coexist? Liam Carter shared some of her concerns, but focused more on practical matters. He worked tirelessly to repair the damage the ship had sustained during their escape. The hull had been scratched by debris, and several systems needed recalibration after the stress of rapid takeoff. Grace Bennett rested in the medical bay, her leg healing slowly thanks to advanced treatments. Adam Hayes kept busy reviewing data collected from the ruins, hoping to uncover more clues about the Vaylans' history. Despite their different tasks, the crew was united by one thing: their determination to understand what they had witnessed. Rachel called a meeting in the common area to discuss their next steps. She stood at the front of the room, her expression serious. "We know who the Vaylans are now," she began. "They're conquerors who underestimated us and paid the price. But we also know they're not gone. Something survived down there, something waiting for us." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. None of them wanted to return to Erebus, but they all knew the mission wasn't over. If the Vaylans posed a threat to Earth, humanity needed to prepare. Liam leaned forward, his arms crossed. "What do you suggest?" he asked. "We can't go back to that planet, it's too dangerous." Rachel nodded, acknowledging his point. "I agree we shouldn't land again, but we can't ignore what we found either. Those creatures are still alive, possibly regrouping. If they decide to attack Earth, we'll have no way to defend ourselves, unless we learn more." Adam chimed in, holding up a tablet displaying schematics of the Vaylan ruins. "There might be another way," he said. "The energy readings we picked up earlier weren't just localized. They spanned most of the planet. That means the Vaylans built an entire network underground, maybe even spanning multiple continents. If we can map it, we might find weak points or vulnerabilities." Rachel's eyes lit up. "That could work," she said, "but mapping the network would require scanning from orbit. It's risky. If the Valens detect us, they'll retaliate. Grace spoke for the first time, her voice quiet but firm. We don't have much choice, do we? She asked. If we leave now, we'll always wonder if we missed something important. And if the Valens come for Earth, we'll regret not doing everything we could to stop them. Her words struck a chord with everyone. They had signed up for this mission knowing the risks, and now it was time to face them head-on. The decision was made. The Endeavour would remain in orbit around Erebus long enough to conduct detailed scans of the planet's surface and subsurface. To minimize the risk of detection, they would use passive sensors instead of active ones, relying on subtle changes in radiation and temperature to identify hidden structures. It was a slow process, requiring patience and precision, but the crew threw themselves into the task with renewed focus. As the days passed, patterns began to emerge. The scans revealed a vast labyrinth of tunnels crisscrossing beneath the planet's crust, connecting clusters of ruins like veins in a body. Some areas glowed faintly with residual energy, suggesting dormant machinery or power sources. Others were dark and silent, likely abandoned or destroyed during the conflict with humans. Rachel studied the images closely, piecing together the layout of the network. She noticed something strange. A central hub located deep underground, surrounded by concentric rings of fortified chambers. It looked like a command center, possibly where the surviving Valens had taken refuge. This is it, Rachel said during another meeting. If we want answers, we need to investigate that hub. It's the heart of their operation. Liam frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the idea. You realize this means going back down there, right? He asked. Rachel nodded. Yes, but only for a short time. We'll send a small team, armed and ready to retreat at the first sign of trouble. The team consisted of Rachel, Liam, Adam, and Grace, each chosen for their unique skills. Rachel led the group, her knowledge of the ruins proving invaluable. Liam handled security, ensuring everyone stayed safe. Adam brought technical expertise, capable of hacking alien technology if necessary. Grace provided medical support, though her injured leg limited her mobility. Together, they boarded a shuttle and descended toward the planet once again. The landing site was far from the main ruins, chosen to avoid drawing attention. The crew moved cautiously, sticking to shadows and avoiding open areas. Their goal was to reach the entrance nearest the central hub, marked on their maps as a vertical shaft leading deep underground. As they approached, the air grew colder, and the ground beneath their feet felt unstable. Rachel signaled for silence, her instincts telling her they were being watched. Suddenly, movement caught her eye. A shadow darted between two rocks, too fast to identify. Liam raised his weapon, scanning the area. Stay alert, he whispered. The crew pressed on, their nerves stretched taut. When they finally reached the shaft, Adam examined the mechanism controlling the lift. It was old and rusted, barely functional. After tinkering with it for several minutes, he managed to activate the lift, which groaned loudly as it descended into the darkness below. The ride down was tense, the walls of the shaft passing by in a blur of black stone. When the lift stopped, the team stepped out into a cavernous chamber illuminated by faint green light. The air smelled metallic, and the sound of dripping water echoed in the distance. In the center of the room stood a massive structure resembling a hive, its surface pulsating with rhythmic vibrations. Tubes extended outward like roots, connecting the hive to smaller chambers scattered throughout the cavern. Rachel approached cautiously, her scanner picking up strong energy readings. This must be it, she said. The Valens' last stronghold. Before anyone could respond, a low hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. The tubes began to glow, and the walls of the cavern shifted as if alive. Shadows emerged. From the darkness, Valens, dozens of them surrounding the team. Liam fired his weapon, creating a barrier of plasma bolts to hold the creatures at bay. Adam set up portable barriers while Grace tended to a minor injury caused by falling debris. Rachel shouted instructions, directing the team to focus on specific targets to thin the swarm. The battle was chaotic, with the Valens attacking relentlessly. Their claws slashed through the air, narrowly missing the crew as they fought back. Despite the odds, Rachel remained calm, analyzing the situation. She noticed that the Valens avoided certain areas of the cavern, particularly near the base of the hive. It was almost as if they were protecting something or someone. Realizing this, Rachel formulated a plan. "We need to draw them away from the hive," she told the others. "If we overload the energy core, it might collapse the structure and trap them inside." Liam hesitated. "That's risky," he said. "What if it doesn't work?" Rachel met his gaze, steadily. "It's our best shot," she replied. With no time to argue, the team split up. Liam and Grace created distractions, luring the Valens toward the edges of the cavern. Meanwhile, Rachel and Adam worked together to access the hive's control panel, bypassing layers of alien encryption to trigger an overload sequence. The Valens realized what was happening too late. As the core destabilized, the ground shook violently, sending chunks of rock tumbling down. The team scrambled to escape, dodging falling debris and pursuing enemies. Just as they reached the lift, the core exploded, engulfing the cavern in a blinding flash of light. The shockwave knocked them off their feet, but they managed to climb aboard the lift and ascend to the surface. Back aboard the Endeavour, the crew collapsed in exhaustion, their bodies battered but alive. Rachel stared out the window at Erebus, now a distant speck against the backdrop of stars. They had succeeded in neutralizing the immediate threat, but the cost weighed heavily on her. Humanity's actions, both past and present, had shaped the galaxy in ways she was only beginning to understand. As sleep claimed her, she wondered whether the universe would ever forgive them for their relentless pursuit of survival. Somewhere, far below in the buried chambers of Erebus, the last remnants of the Valons stirred, whispering the same ominous phrase, "Do not fight the humans. They will never let you escape." The Endeavour raced through the void of space, its engines humming steadily as it carried the crew back toward Earth. The mission to Erebus had been successful in neutralizing the immediate threat posed by the Valens. But Rachel Monroe couldn't shake the feeling that they had only scratched the surface of something much larger. The warning from the alien logs echoed in her mind, reminding her of humanity's capacity for destruction. She spent hours alone, in the ship's observation deck, staring at the stars and wondering what kind of legacy humanity would leave in the galaxy. Liam Carter noticed her quiet demeanor and joined her one evening. He sat beside her, his arms resting on the railing as he gazed out at the endless expanse. "You've been quiet since we left Erebus," he said gently. Rachel sighed, turning to look at him. "I keep thinking about what we found down there," she admitted. "The Valens were conquerors, just like us in a way. They saw themselves as superior, unstoppable. But then they met humans, and everything changed." Liam nodded thoughtfully. "We didn't just fight them. We scared them," he said. "That warning wasn't meant for us. It was meant for anyone else who might try to mess with Earth." Rachel frowned, her brow furrowing. "Exactly. What does it say about us if even aliens are afraid to cross us? Are we protectors or predators, explorers or invaders?" Liam didn't have an answer, and neither did Rachel. The questions lingered between them, unanswered and unsettling. Back on Earth, preparations were already underway for their arrival. News of the mission had spread quickly through classified channels, reaching the highest levels of government and military command. A team of scientists, engineers, and strategists awaited the crew's return, eager to analyze the data they had collected and determine the implications for humanity's future in space. Rachel knew the debriefing wouldn't be easy. The discoveries they had made were unprecedented, and the decisions that followed would shape the course of history. When the Endeavour finally touched down at a secure facility in Nevada, the crew was greeted by a swarm of officials in crisp uniforms. Cameras flashed as they stepped off the ship, their faces tired but resolute. Rachel took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. She had always dreamed of making a groundbreaking discovery, but now she realized that knowledge came with responsibility and consequences. The debriefing lasted for days. Rachel presented her findings to a panel of experts, explaining everything they had learned about the Valens and their warning. She showed footage of the ruins, the holographic recordings, and the battle beneath Erebus. Her voice remained steady as she recounted the events, though her hands trembled slightly when she mentioned the final explosion. The officials listened intently, their expressions unreadable. When she finished, there was a long silence before one of them spoke. "This changes everything," said General Harris, a stern man with sharp features and piercing eyes. "If these Vaylans feared us enough to issue such a warning, it means humanity is a force to be reckoned with. We can't ignore the potential threat they represent, but we also can't let fear dictate our actions." Rachel nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. The question was no longer whether humanity could defend itself. It was whether it should expand its reach into the stars. Liam shared his perspective during the next session. As an engineer, he focused on the technical aspects of the mission, highlighting the advanced technology used by the Vaylans and the vulnerabilities they had exploited. His insights sparked a lively discussion among the scientists, who debated how to adapt Earth's defenses against similar threats in the future. Grace Bennett added her observations about the Vaylans' biology, describing their physical traits and behavioral patterns. Adam Hayes contributed by presenting detailed maps of the underground network, emphasizing possible weak points in case further action became necessary. Despite their efforts to stay objective, the tone of the meetings shifted over time. Some officials began interpreting the Vaylan warning not as a cautionary tale, but as proof of human superiority. They argued that the mission proved humanity's dominance in the galaxy, suggesting that Earth should take a more aggressive stance in exploring and colonizing other planets. Rachel watched in dismay as the conversation turned from defense to conquest. She tried to intervene, reminding them of the dangers of underestimating alien civilizations, but her warnings fell on deaf ears. One evening, after another exhausting day of presentations, Rachel met Liam in the cafeteria. He looked as frustrated as she felt. "They're missing the point," he muttered, stabbing at his food with a fork. Rachel nodded, pushing her tray aside. "They see this as validation," she said, "proof that we're stronger than anyone else out there. But strength isn't the same as wisdom. If we start acting like the Vaylans, we'll end up just like them, feared and hated." Liam sighed, leaning back in his chair. "What can we do?" he asked. "They're not going to listen to us. Not when they think they've already won." Rachel hesitated, unsure of how to respond. She wanted to believe that humanity could rise above its instincts, choosing cooperation over conflict. But history had shown her otherwise. Nations fought, wars over land, resources, and power, driven by greed and fear. Why would space be any different? As the days passed, Rachel grew increasingly uneasy. Security around the facility tightened, and rumors spread about plans to develop new weapons based on Vaylan technology. Scientists worked around the clock to reverse engineer the data collected during the mission, while military leaders drafted strategies for expanding Earth's influence beyond the solar system. Rachel felt like a bystander, powerless to stop the machinery of ambition once it was set in motion. One night, unable to sleep, Rachel wandered outside the facility and stared up at the sky. The stars twinkled faintly, distant and indifferent. She thought about the Vaylans, trapped in their buried chambers, whispering their warning to anyone who would listen. Did they understand what they had unleashed by provoking humanity? Or had they simply underestimated the depth of human determination? Either way, the outcome had been disastrous for them, and potentially for others. Rachel returned to her quarters, her mind racing. She opened her laptop and began typing a letter, addressing it to future generations. In it, she described everything they had discovered, from the ruins of Erebus to the chilling message left behind by the Vaylans. She urged readers to approach the stars with humility rather than arrogance, to seek understanding instead of domination. "We are explorers," she wrote, "but we must also be guardians, protecting not only ourselves, but the fragile balance of life in the universe." By the time she finished, dawn was breaking over the horizon. Exhausted but resolute, Rachel saved the document and sent it to several trusted colleagues, asking them to preserve it for posterity. She knew it might never reach the right people or make a difference, but she had to try. Humanity's greatest strength lay in its ability to learn, adapt, and grow. Perhaps someday someone would read her words and choose a different path. In the weeks that followed, Rachel and the crew returned to their normal lives, though nothing felt quite the same. The mission to Erebus had changed them, forcing them to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves and their species. Rachel continued her work at the observatory, scanning the skies for signs of life beyond Earth. Each signal she detected reminded her of the delicate line between curiosity and conquest, between exploration and exploitation. Meanwhile, the wheels of progress turned relentlessly. New technologies emerged, inspired by the Velan's designs. Space agencies launched ambitious missions to nearby star systems, driven by dreams of colonization and expansion. Politicians gave speeches about humanity's destiny among the stars, painting a picture of a bright and prosperous future. Yet beneath the surface, tensions simmered, fueled by competition and mistrust. Rachel often thought about the last moments on Erebus when the ground shook and the hive collapsed. She remembered the Velan's glowing eyes and razor-sharp claws, their relentless pursuit of survival. And she remembered the warning whispered in the darkness, "Do not fight the humans, they will never let you escape." It wasn't just a message for aliens, it was a reflection of humanity's own nature, a reminder of the choices that defined them. As she stood in the observatory one night, watching the stars twinkle in the distance, Rachel whispered a silent prayer. Somewhere out there, the universe waited, vast and unknowable. Whether humanity chose to explore it with care or conquer it with force remained to be seen. All she could do was hope, for wisdom, for compassion, and for a future where the stars brought light instead of shadows. Years passed since the mission to Erebus, and Rachel Monroe found herself back at the observatory where it all began. The mountains of Colorado remained as quiet and serene as ever, but the world beyond had changed in ways she could never have imagined. Humanity's reach into space had grown exponentially, fueled by discoveries made during Project Horizon. New colonies dotted the edges of Earth's solar system, and plans were underway to venture even farther. Yet with every step forward, Rachel felt a growing unease, as if humanity was walking blindly toward an unseen cliff. The letter she had written after returning from Erebus had been shared widely within scientific circles, sparking debates about humanity's role in the cosmos. Some praised her words, agreeing that exploration should be guided by humility and respect for other life forms. Others dismissed her concerns, arguing that survival required strength and dominance. Over time, the arguments faded into the background, drowned out by the roar of progress. Spacecraft launched daily, carrying settlers, scientists, and soldiers to distant worlds. The stars seemed closer than ever, yet Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that they were slipping further away. One evening, as she sat alone in the control room, a strange signal appeared on her monitor. At first, it looked like static, faint and distant. But then, patterns emerged, repeating sequences that sent chills down her spine. The signal wasn't coming from Proxima Centauri this time. Its origin was much farther away, deep in the uncharted regions of the galaxy. Rachel froze, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she adjusted the settings to isolate the source. When the playback reached a certain point, her heart sank. Hidden within the rhythmic pulses was a message, eerily similar to the one they had received years ago. "Do not fight the humans. They will never let you escape." Rachel called Liam Carter immediately. He arrived at the observatory within hours, his face pale as he listened to the recording. "It's happening again," he said softly. "They're warning each other about us." Rachel nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "We didn't listen last time," she whispered. "And now we're doing the same thing the Valens did, spreading fear instead of understanding." The discovery sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Officials demanded answers, just as they had before, but this time the stakes were higher. The signal came from a region of space where multiple alien civilizations were believed to exist, some far more advanced than humanity. If those civilizations saw Earth as a threat, the consequences could be catastrophic. Rachel pleaded with the authorities to take a cautious approach, urging them to send peaceful envoys rather than armed ships. But her pleas went unanswered. Military leaders argued that showing weakness would invite attack, while politicians claimed that Earth had a duty to protect its people at all costs. As preparations for a new mission began, Rachel struggled with guilt. She had dedicated her life to uncovering the mysteries of the universe, believing that knowledge would bring unity and peace. Instead, it had become a tool for division and destruction. The warnings from Erebus and beyond had been clear. Yet humanity ignored them, blinded by ambition and pride. Rachel wondered if she had made a mistake by sharing what they had found. Would the galaxy have been safer if the truth had stayed buried? Liam tried to comfort her, reminding her that none of this was her fault. "You did what you thought was right," he said. "No one could have predicted how things would turn out." Rachel shook her head, her voice trembling. "That's the problem. We didn't think far enough ahead. We focused on what we wanted instead of what we needed." Liam sighed, unable to offer a solution. Like Rachel, he was caught between hope and despair, unsure of how to bridge the gap between humanity's potential and its flaws. The new mission launched under heavy secrecy, carrying a crew tasked with investigating the source of the latest signal. Unlike Project Horizon, this expedition was led by military personnel rather than scientists. Their orders were clear: gather intelligence and neutralize any threats before they reached Earth. Rachel watched the launch from the observatory, her stomach twisting with dread. She knew the mission wouldn't end peacefully. Humanity's pattern of behavior left little room for diplomacy. Weeks later, reports began trickling in from the crew. They had located the signal's origin, a massive structure floating in the void of space, surrounded by smaller vessels resembling guardians. The structure emitted low-frequency waves, broadcasting the warning across light years. When the crew attempted to establish contact, the response was hostile. Alien ships swarmed the human vessel, firing energy weapons that overwhelmed its defenses. The crew fought back valiantly, but their efforts were futile against superior numbers and technology. In the end, only fragments of the ship returned to Earth carrying grim news. The incident sparked panic across the globe. Governments declared states of emergency, mobilizing fleets to defend Earth against potential retaliation. Scientists scrambled to analyze data recovered from the wreckage, searching for clues about the attacker's identity and motives. What they found confirmed Rachel's worst fears. The aliens belonged to a coalition of species united by one common goal: stopping humanity before it spread too far. They viewed Earth as a danger to the galaxy, citing the Vaylon's fate as proof of human aggression. Rachel attended a meeting with top officials to discuss the findings. Her presence was requested not because they valued her opinion, but because she represented the beginning of this chain of events. As she stood before the panel, she felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. "This is what happens when we act without thinking," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "We've become exactly what the Vaylons feared, a force that cannot be contained. Now others are afraid of us, and we've given them every reason to be." Her words fell on deaf ears. The officials were more concerned with defense strategies than moral dilemmas. Plans were drawn up to fortify Earth's borders, build bigger ships, and develop deadlier weapons. Rachel realized there was no turning back. Humanity had chosen its path, and nothing could change its course now. In the months that followed, Rachel retreated into solitude, spending most of her time at the observatory. She continued scanning the skies, hoping to find something, anything, that might offer a glimmer of hope. One night, as she gazed at the stars, a thought occurred to her. Perhaps the problem wasn't humanity itself, but the way it defined success. Strength and power weren't inherently bad, but they became dangerous when pursued at the expense of empathy and cooperation. If humanity could learn to balance these traits, maybe it could still find its place among the stars. Rachel decided to write another letter, this time addressing not just future generations but anyone who might read it, human or alien. In it, she described the mistakes humanity had made and the lessons it had learned the hard way. She acknowledged the harm caused by arrogance and ignorance, pledging to do better if given the chance. "We are explorers," she wrote, "but we are also learners. If you see us as a threat, know that we are capable of change. If you see us as allies, know that we are willing to listen. Together, perhaps we can create a future worth sharing." She sent the letter into space, attaching it to a probe designed to travel beyond the reaches of known civilization. Whether it would reach its intended audience was uncertain, but Rachel hoped it would serve as a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest corners of the universe, light could still shine. As she stood in the observatory one final time, Watching the probe disappear into the void, Rachel felt a sense of peace wash over her. Humanity's journey was far from over, and its destination remained unclear. But as long as there were those willing to dream of a better tomorrow, there was always a chance for redemption. Somewhere out there, the stars waited, silent witnesses, to the story unfolding below. And somewhere deep in the shadows, the Valon's warning echoed faintly, a haunting reminder of choices made and paths taken. Do not fight the humans. They will never let you escape. This completes Part 5 and concludes the story.